Welcome back to the Silent Plus podcast. My name is Josh Watford. I'm stocked up, all stuffy. But across the table from me is
John Nicholson. Glad to be back with you.
And we have a very special guest.
Indeed.
Well, I'm Kevin Blackwell. I'm Executive Director of the Mobile Baptist Network and also Assistant Professor for Disciple Making at the University of Mobile. A husband of 30 years, father of 4, child of God.
There you go. Hey, that's a great intro. I like that.
He was having to look at his notes.
I was wondering about that.
I looked at those for that.
My life's not nearly that complicated.
Wait, how many kids do I have?
Don't ask the birthdays, right?
Put out all your fingers and toes and have to count those down. But yeah, Kevin, it's been a real blessing to have you here this week. We're right here at the end of our winter Bible study for 2026. And, I think every year we say this is the best one yet. And but I can clearly say and honestly say that this has been at least among my favorite ones. This is certainly memorable in many different ways. And just spending extra time with you outside of the winter Bible study time.
Yeah, that's been a real gift.
Yeah, it's
really grateful for that
I think
time.
Gift is a really good word for that. And so thank you for investing in me and John while you've been here.
It's been mutually beneficial.
You don't get a bonus for that, right?
That's right. It's been great to hang out with you guys and to get to know your people. There's a precious group of people here off of Washington Street in Marion, and so grateful for them.
Yeah, and our folks have really been appreciative of what you have brought to the table for them, and we want to talk a little bit about that. We've been walking through the book of John, and you said, I don't know if it's the first night or second night, but you made the reference that that the book of John is your favorite gospel.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Why is John Kevin Blackwell's favorite gospel?
Well, because most of the early verses I learned as a child came out of John, right?
Yep. John 3:16, Jesus wept, John 10:35, right?
Yeah, that's right. It truly is shallow enough for kindergartners to grasp, but yet deep enough for the greatest theological minds in the world to just be puzzled, by, for example, the first 18 verses of the first chapter alone. It would just blow your mind. I think John just gives us this incredibly unique view of Jesus that the synoptics don't give. And, I mentioned to your folks that there are more words of Jesus in John. I mean, John chose to dedicate the back half of his book to really that last night that Jesus had with them. It just made such an impression on John that and honestly it's a little puzzling why for example Matthew didn't record some of that. But John he really wanted to focus on the words of Christ, the red letters, as we would say. And so, John, I would say that's why that is probably so precious to me, because the red words in my Bible, to really listen to the heart of Christ, it comes through so well throughout the book, obviously, but man, especially in chapters 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Yeah. That little section right there that starts with the washing of the feet, and ends with the pastoral prayer of Jesus in 17, which leads seamlessly, into the cross. Right. And it is a remarkable section of Scripture.
It really is. That was such a beautiful insight, and I think Roger Harper had made that comment as we had begun the process of writing through the Gospel of John, which was one of the things we were trying to do as a church to help prepare us for this time. He made the comment that he had forgotten how much dialogue is there, because he was always, as you're writing, you're having to do all the quote marks all the time. But you kind of brought that home, and I had really not ever paused, I think, to think through the fact that there is so much of what Jesus has to say there, that John chooses that.
Yeah, and so as we've been walking through these, it's not been really the whole gospel. It's been the 7 I am statements of Jesus. And, when we were looking at, there's the typical 7 I am statements, that it's the I am plus a predicate, right? That's that formula. But then there are some non-traditional I am statements in the Gospel of John that pop up. And my favorite one, you even alluded to it sometime this past week. All my days run together. But it's when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and Judas and the temple guards come, and he says, who is Jesus, or something like that. Ask him, like, which one of you is Jesus? And he says, I am.
Yes.
I am he. Yeah.
And they fall.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's just ego and me, the Greek I am.
Yeah.
And they fall down, and then they get back up and they ask the same question again. And that just that confounds me. And so it's those types of I am statements that are outside of the I am predicate formula statements.
Of course, there's also the one there in John 8 where Jesus having that confrontation, which a lot of the first part of John, he's having confrontation with the religious leaders, but he says, before Abraham was, I am. And of course, that was really the moment where those guys began to kind of think through their strategy.
That's it.
Yeah, we've heard enough, right? Yep. Before Abraham was, I am. So there's that. I go back to that scene that you're talking about in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus literally blew them away with his words. We can't forget that John is the same writer in Revelation too, that speaks of Christ with the sword coming out of his mouth, slaying the enemy, at the end time. So there's even an eschatological reality, right? That in the future, during the battles, he simply is speaking the words of truth and slaying enemies. And there's a lot of power in that.
Absolutely, there is.
Yeah, it's those, and also on the Sea of Galilee when he's walking on the water, and, everybody's afraid in the boat because they're thinking they see a ghost, and he says, I am, do not be afraid. In our English it says, it is I, but it's ego and me. Mm-hmm. I am.
Ego and me. That's
do not be afraid. So it's these other I am statements that where he just says I am, particularly walking on the Sea of Galilee, the one he says before Abraham was I am, and then the one in Garden of Gethsemane, that really proved to me that you made this statement the very first, I guess it was that morning, that these are statements of who he is as God.
Right.
It's not just a general statement like, I am a good shepherd. Right.
He's not just sharing metaphors.
No, it's not just a simple parable.
Right.
This is his self-proclamation of who he is.
Yes.
It's his nature, it's his characteristics. And so that was... that's been solidified in my heart over this past week.
Yeah, they're theological statements of the greatest weight, the greatest depth. And frankly, all of them are pointing back to an Old Testament tie-in. Right. I mean, we could look at every one of them. I'm the bread, talking about the manna, but this manna stays forever, doesn't ruin every day. I'm the light, the pillar by day, fire by night. I'm the light of the world. And of course it goes on and on and on there. So certainly it is more than him just saying this is a characteristic of mine. He is saying, I am the Father. We are one.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a theological statement.
Yeah, that's just been, even just last night when he says, I am the resurrection. One of the points you made that just, again, solidified in my heart last night is, you said something to the extent of that, I don't come to just bring resurrection, or I've come to give you resurrection. He says, I am the resurrection.
Right.
And that is, that even changes how you understand your own resurrection, right? Spiritual and physical.
Right.
Like, it's not that it's not just a gift that he gives that's outside of himself. It's that when he gives himself, that's a byproduct because that's who he is.
Right. That's right.
And so that was really helpful.
We find life, right? I am the resurrection and the life. And of course, we'll talk about that tonight too.
Yeah.
From John 14.
Yeah. We're looking forward to that. And so, just thinking through how this fits in, because, these aren't things that are separate from the whole story of John. And so when we asked you, like, hey, can you teach on the Gospel of John? And because that's just what Lifeway put out as the winter Bible study for this year, and I believe you responded back like, "Can we do the 7 I.M. statements of John?" So, I guess help us. This is kind of a spur of the moment question, but how do the 7 I.M. statements of John help us to understand the gospel as a whole, rather than just like, I don't know, just little episodes taken out? Like, we don't want to take them out of context or anything like that, but how does that kind of help us track the flow of the way the Gospel of John's going?
Well, keep in mind the way that John starts his Gospel there in the prologue of the Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So literally in the very beginning, the very first verse, John is setting a tone here for why he is writing his Gospel. And of course it carries on into his epistles as well, right?
That's right?
And so what is his goal? Well, his goal is to show us that Christ, the deity of Christ, right? I mean, it comes through very clear here. So I think these 7 I.M. statements really do, in a sense, frame the theological foundations of the entire Gospel of John. Because again, he's tying these statements back. Jesus is. John's recording it, but right. Jesus is. He's tying these statements back to the fact that he is deity, that Jesus is God. And I remind you that when Thomas toward the end of the book, right, sees the resurrected Lord and said, well, I won't believe until I see the holes in nail scars in his hands and feet. Yep. And Jesus shows him the scars. And you remember Thomas' response, my Lord and my God. Yeah. And of course, Jesus doesn't rebuke him for saying that. In fact, the very reason that the church leaders, the religious leaders, were wanting to kill him is because he claimed to be God. And so those 7 statements really frame that whole topic throughout the gospel. And in fact, once you get to the end of the book, particularly at the end of chapter 20, John says, many other signs did Jesus do in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you might have life through his name. And we see, of course, that continues in his epistles. And so I really think that they frame it. Now, some of that was also, I don't know if I've got time to cover 21 chapters in 4 days.
Right.
So I felt like this might be a better path to be able to still accomplish what we want to accomplish.
Yep.
Yeah, and you've done such a good job, I think, in giving us context for each of these. And that was helpful for me with a couple of those, just seeing, okay, that immediate context of what's happening right before gives some additional weight to this moment where he does say, I am. And that was really helpful. And this issue of him really very clearly saying that he's God. And I've often said that. I know some of the new atheists would make that comment that Jesus never claimed to be God. I'm like, did they read John? I mean, how do you get around reading John and not seeing that that's the claim? Right. So is John writing primarily to the Jewish community? I mean, because the Jewish people would have heard the ego I me with that clear hyperlink, if you will, to borrow Tim Mackey's idea, back to the burning bush. Or is it to the Gentiles? Because, the Gentiles also would have had their stories of the gods coming down, at least appearing to be man.
Right.
How do we frame that? And what's the context that you see since John writing this and that message, how it translates for us?
I do sense that he's writing first to the Jews here just because there are so many Jewish things in the gospel, particularly in the 7 I.M. statements. Again, they're all pointing back to precious Jewish symbols that would immediately connected his audience with the deity of Jesus. But we also need to keep in mind that John lived longer than any of the disciples, and certainly I think it's easy to believe that John probably had some interaction with Gentile believers.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? I mean, some of that even comes through in his epistles, particularly 3 John.
Right.
I do think that he is writing to the Jewish people here because his goal is for them to believe that Jesus Christ is truly the Son of God, and to the Jew first, and then to the Greek. As the way we kind of frame the Scripture, and so that's simply my thoughts, John. I'd welcome your thoughts on that.
No, I think I would agree. I think it is primarily the Jewish audience. I would add to that, his emphasis on the feasts and those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's
that
right.
would have immediately resonated with the Jewish folks.
Yeah. And John gives us the first year of Jesus' ministry and gives us actually 3 Passovers within it.
Yeah.
And so he's emphasizing these things. Let me just say this too. We can't forget that John 3:16 is famous for a reason, right? I mean, for God so loved the world.
Yes.
It doesn't say that for God so loved the Jews. God so loved the world. Right. And so while certainly we would believe that there's a Jewish audience here that's reading this, we also would agree that the tone of John's gospel was that this would not stay within the Jewish people, right? That it would extend beyond and on into the world. Yeah.
Yeah, you were going to say something?
Sorry, Josh.
Oh, I was just going to say, it was fascinating to me to realize that the Synoptic Gospels, if those were the only 3 we would have, we'd believe that Jesus' ministry is only 1 year long. So you just get 1 Passover there. John's Gospel is where we understand that Jesus' ministry was 3 years.
Right.
And because he follows those 3 different Passovers, that he makes that trek down to Jerusalem for. And so one of the things writing through John is that John really cares about where people were when they were there.
Yeah, that's good.
And so, him being able to record these 7 I am statements as well, they're always located, and this is my question about the context, is that they're not just random, right? There is a reason why he's giving this particular I am statement at this particular time in this particular place, right? Yeah. You're going to talk about I am the vine, you are the branches tonight. Yeah. Guess where they probably were? They were probably going through the vineyard.
They were. They were falling through the Kidron Valley at that point.
Yeah. So he probably had his hand on a cluster of grapes,
without a doubt. And even with, as I said the other night, with the light of the world, happens during the Festival of Booths. Chances are, in part of the temple, on cords of women, with the large menorahs in the background that were lit every night, except that last night, which they remained dark. And it was on that dark night that Jesus stood up and said, "You don't need a lamp, I'm the lamp." Right?
Yeah. I am that
so
light.
To your point, that's true. Another unique thing about this gospel is there are so many stories in the gospel that the synoptics don't cover. And I mentioned the other day that John's gospel is oftentimes called the other gospel, just because the timeline is just so drastically different, and so many of the stories that frankly are very precious to me we find only in John's gospel. And so that alone makes it unique. Now, why did John write on those things and the other writers didn't? It is a bit of a mystery, but I think John was just so struck in these moments where, for example, Jesus engaged with a Samaritan woman at a well and expands their mind of what the kingdom could look like. And so those are very significant moments in the gospel that are preparing these guys to go and make disciples of all nations. And so I think that's part of the gospel that to me is so precious.
Yeah. And kind of back to your point, Josh, one of the things that strikes me with that, and you and I have had a lot of conversation around this, is this embodied truth. That not only was there this significance in the place of having the menorahs there in the background, and I am the light of the world, or a vineyard there, and I am the vine, you're the branches, giving them that, but that it's hugely embodied, that there is a time and place that Jesus is there with them and saying, "I'm God." I forget who said it, but that the early church had difficulty believing that Jesus was a deity because they were so connected, as John would say in his first letter, what we've seen, what we've heard, what we've handled with our hands.
Well, he says in the Gospels too,
Yeah.
at the very last of his Gospel.
So they didn't have any trouble believing he was human because they ate breakfast with him. You know, they did those things.
He's writing against Gnostic beliefs here.
And it's the challenge for that early church was that he was God. I think our challenge, I mean, we're okay with him being God, but as Eugene Peterson so wonderfully says, that he became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood.
Right.
We've got difficulty with Jesus being that human.
Yeah.
And that embodied. But that's exactly what's going on with this. And I think that's part of the startling nature of those I am statements for the Jews particularly, but really for us as well when we stop to think about it, is that this isn't just some nice, spiritualized idea. No, this was rock solid right here in front of them.
Yeah, it is true. And that's why this is one of the great contributions of the Gospel of John, is this very thought of this, what we would call the hypostatic union of Christ.
Okay, you've thrown theological terms. What are we talking about?
Is 100% God, 100% man.
Right.
Yep.
And that's a tough thing. But to your point, John, I mean, the early church, that was the struggle, right? You think about the Arian controversy and those types of things where they're trying to land on somewhere. You got to do something with the statements that Jesus makes, the claims he makes about himself, right? So thankfully we put that behind us. But I do think you're right. I think it does come to a point now where we have to come to grips with the fact that our God came, put on skin, lived among us, died a sinner's death, and now has been resurrected and reigning. And how does that impact our life today? How does that change the way you treat your neighbor? How does that change the way that you are married to your wife? How does that change the way you raise your children? How does that change the way you're an employee at this company? I mean, if that reality is true, and of course we all believe it is, it changes every aspect of our life.
It changes everything. And even, as you talked about so eloquently last night, so beautifully, it changes how we approach death.
Absolutely.
If he is, in fact, the resurrection.
Yeah. It gives us a new perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah. So beautiful. Such good stuff. But
that's all the questions I had.
That's great.
You got something else?
It has been so good. And Kevin, again, let me just, as a pastor, to you as someone who is pastoring pastors now, just thank you for how you have invested so wonderfully in the life of our church these past few days. It will bear fruit, and I am so grateful for that. And I know that our folks, the attendance itself speaks for itself. They have wanted to hear these truths. They've wanted to come to grips and grapple with what does this mean for me going back to work tomorrow. It's
an honor, John, and you and Josh are dear friends of mine. Again, y'all voted me into membership.
That's right.
I'm an unofficial member.
You're under watch care right now.
I'm under watch care. That's right. But no, this is a precious place to me, and you guys are great friends. Thank you for the hospitality you've shown me, and it's been good for me. It's been refreshing for me as well. So it's a great honor to be with you guys.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, and we will be posting your notes to our app, so folks, y'all can go back and find those there. And
videos are up.
Videos are going up as well, so you can go back and review these. So I encourage you to do that. You may want to share them with some friends if you need to.
All right. We'll see y'all next time.
Thanks so much.